the Morse Force. I want to talk a little bit about my very own senator here in Massachusetts, that being none other than Elizabeth Warren, who is having a controversy once again, this time over President Trump's comments about Pocahontas to the Navajo codebreakers at the White House, and her claim that this somehow is his problem and that he's has something against Native American men and women. First of all, I think before getting into the topic of Elizabeth Warren, let me just comment about President Trump. President Trump, in some ways, reminds me of a late relative of mine. He was a man who was very obnoxious in many ways, very awkward in social settings, would say sometimes the most ridiculous things, the most awful things, at least seemed to be awful things. And sometimes, it could be quite cruel. But he got away with it because we all knew that he didn't mean it. He had like a tone deafness. He didn't realize how bad he had sounded, and that he wasn't, conniving. He wasn't planning on being bad and doing bad. He had a good heart. He was a good person. He was intelligent, and that he meant well. And so, even though sometimes what he did and what he said could be cringeworthy, we would look the other way because we knew that in the bigger sense, he was a good person. And that's how I see President Trump sometimes when he makes these comments that, they're not appropriate. They make you cringe. I mean, making reference to Pocahontas with that kind of thinking it's funny at this event, this very solemn event. Everybody kind of just like, ooh, you cringe a little bit. But you know that he doesn't, he's trying to say something, he doesn't mean badly. He certainly isn't trying to in any way insult Native American men and women. Everyone knows that's nonsense. And that his meaning is good. It's not, it's I think, much more preferable to a public figure, a president, and I'm not going to give examples, who might sound wonderful and slick and every word is perfectly crafted and, everything is excellent and their tone is right and they always look polished, but yet they don't always mean well. There's an agenda going on. They have double meaning, triple meaning, quadruple meaning to every word they say. It's almost like they're using a language that it's kind of what French philosopher Elaine Benescon called a totalitarian language. It sounds great, everything is smooth, but it does have double meanings. It is, in the classic sense, the left likes to talk about dog whistles. They're projecting when they say that. It is filled with dog whistles, and it's something that can be quite sinister in its meaning, if for no other reason than it isn't what it claims to be. So I would prefer Donald Trump with his basic honesty, even though it can at times make you cringe, to this kind of well-packaged and slick, well-sounding elitist language that is not honest and that is expressing ideas oftentimes that are not well-meaning. Anyway, so let me get into the business of Elizabeth Warren. President Trump made reference to her as Pocahontas at this meeting. Now, this has become a popular reference to Elizabeth Warren, making fun of the fact that she has claimed to be Native American in order to advance her career. On several occasions in her checkered past, particularly at Harvard University in the attempt to get tenure, and I believe at the University of Pennsylvania in an attempt to get a job, she checked off the box minority, claiming to be a Native American, while at other other opportunities she didn't. She just didn't check off a minority box. But the minority box, of course, advanced her. At Harvard, she was able to, by claiming to be 1/32% Cherokee, which turned out, by the way, even then not to be true, she was referred to by the Harvard Women's Law Journal as a, quote, woman of color, and by the Harvard Crimson and the Fordham Law Review. Harvard was able to claim that they had hired as a tenured professor a woman of color, Elizabeth Warren. She defrauded the affirmative action system, in other words, which, we thought that the left loves affirmative action. They want to have a quota on this group or that group because they're disadvantaged. Okay, fine. We could argue that issue another day. The point is that she defrauded that system, and she took a slot away from a real, genuine Native American in the process of advancing her own career, lining her own pocket, and possibly deceiving even herself, which gets me to a point. Elizabeth Warren has a long record of engaging in what I call stolen valor. She will glom onto various causes and various identities in order to advance an agenda that either is self-serving or that she wants to glom onto. She makes her feel good, and that it's not true. I mean, her career is marked by these examples of stolen valor. She insinuates herself into whatever is promoted, whatever is popular at the moment. I mean, more recently, I'll point out that Elizabeth Warren glommed into the issue of women discussing their sexual assault. There's this epidemic of sexual assault, and women are telling their stories. She told she spoke on national television. I think it was Todd's program, where she claims to have been sexually assaulted, because this is what all women are talking about right now. She couldn't help herself. She had to be part of this television interview where women in Congress talked about their stories of having been sexually assaulted, when it turned out that it was really not true, that the man that she accused of during this segment is someone that, first of all, she said he had chased her around the office. The man, it turned out, apparently was handicapped. He was in a wheelchair, so it's not likely he chased her anywhere. And secondly, that she, he advanced her career. He was a professor at one of her at her college, and that she gave a eulogy at his funeral where she praised him and spoke very highly of him. So maybe something happened, maybe it didn't, but as typical of Elizabeth Warren, there's exaggeration and there's humbug involved. There's always this kind of element of phoniness with her. She, she projects, is the bottom line. She, she'll attack. The other element of her stolen valor is that she will attack others, both other groups and other people, for doing exactly what it is that she does. And this entire business of her attacking the millionaires and the billionaires and the rigging the system. She's one of the richest members of Congress. She's worth over $10 million. Her election in Massachusetts to the U.S. Senate got more corporate donations than any, I believe, in history up until that point. Money pouring in from other states to help elect her. She, was a creature of the corporations that she constantly is criticizing, in that while she was at Harvard, and by the way, acting as a side gig as a lawyer while being unlicensed in Massachusetts to do so, she represented several of these big corporations as they tried to screw over the little guy. She represented Travelers Insurance when the workers tried to collect for asbestos poisoning against their policies. Apparently Travelers Insurance had handled the asbestos policy for the company Manville, a big manufacturing firm. And she stepped in and made sure that they got peanuts. She settled the cases by removing the insurance company from liability and setting up a separate entity and then paying out small amounts. There were people who never got coverage, who had paid into the system their entire working life, and who probably died before they got anything, which was nothing. She stepped in a union dispute. Even Ted Kennedy, the late Senator Kennedy, criticized her at the time, stopping union members from getting a benefit by representing the corporation who was trying to screw them over. There are many examples of this where she would get a check for $250,000, maybe more, to engage in these, to take these cases, operating as an insider. I think probably the most infamous was Dow Chemical, a chemical company. Is that when does the left like chemical companies? An international corporation who was being sued by women because of the breast implants that they had created toxic shock. Women! I thought the champion of women is there helping Dow Chemical screw these women who were sick and making sure that they didn't get any settlement from Dow Chemical. A lot of them probably passed away since then. The truth, they cry for justice from the grave for this. I mean, Elizabeth Warren, of course, was making a tidy sum from this corporation to screw these women over. Anyway, there's a long and sordid history of this with Elizabeth Warren. Going all the way back to when she started out in Oklahoma flipping properties as a real estate lawyer, and making a tidy profit for herself and her family, and in one case is driving out a woman whose husband was in Iraq. She drove the woman and her baby out of the house because they had been a couple of days late on paying their mortgage. It's kind of the scale, very similar scandal to the Clintons' Whitewater scandal. Screwing working people and working with the banks that she rails against. Anyway, I bring this up because Elizabeth Warren, I think, is even too phony for the left. And I think that if they ultimately choose her for high office, they're going to be in for a real awakening themselves. It's going to be, because the more that's going to come out about how fraudulent she is. And, look, I think that on the left, you always have a little bit of humbug anyway. You always have a little phoniness. These are not people who live by the very laws that they want to foist on the rest of us. But even in that context, Elizabeth Warren really goes too far. So, anyways, I want to thank you for watching today, everybody. I shall return, God willing, tomorrow. I'm trying to do this thing every day now. And have a good afternoon.